yet again today that the United States of America can rely on the full support of its 18 NATO allies in the campaign against international terrorism.
Donald Trump, who avoided military service 5 times during the Vietnam War, has now publicly dismissed the sacrifices of NATO allied soldiers who fought and died alongside U.S. forces in Afghanistan.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
The issue is not merely the insults. Trump's remarks are widely seen as a blunt denial of history, denying the price America's allies paid in lives. It was the U.S. itself that called on NATO for support after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the alliance's core collective defense mechanism, was invoked for the first and only time in history not to defend Europe, but to defend the United States. NATO allies answered that call without hesitation.
All allies stand united in their determination to combat this scourge. At this critical moment, the United States can rely on its 18 allies in North America and Europe for both assistance and for support. NATO solidarity remains the essence of our alliance. Our message to the people of the United States is that we are with you. Our message to those who perpetrated these unspeakable crimes is equally clear. You will not get away with it.
They sent troops and equipment and accepted domestic political risks to join a war thousands of miles away because an ally had been attacked. For more than 20 years, Afghanistan became NATO's shared battlefield. And there, soldiers from the United Kingdom, Denmark, Canada, the Netherlands, France, and many other countries were never in the rear. In Helmand Province, one of the most brutal theaters of the war, British forces suffered their heaviest losses since the Korean War. In total, 457 British soldiers were killed in Afghanistan. This is not an abstract statistic, but hundreds of families who lost sons, husbands, and fathers in a war they believed they were fighting for the collective security of the alliance. Denmark, a country with a small population, is another example that has fueled particular outrage in Europe over Trump's remarks. According to military data, Denmark had one of the highest per capita casualty rates of the entire Afghanistan campaign, second only to or on par with the US. That means relative to population size. Danes sacrificed more than most other NATO allies. Portraying these soldiers as people who were not on the front lines is seen as not only factually wrong, but a direct insult to the memory of those who fell. The political response in the United Kingdom was swift and forceful. The British Prime Minister called Trump's remarks insulting and unacceptable, stressing that such words deeply wound military families and damage allied relations. Prince Harry, who served 2 tours in Helmand, made a rare but unequivocal statement, affirming that NATO soldiers' sacrifices must be acknowledged honestly and with respect, in a context where the British royal family typically avoids direct political controversy. The statement carried significant symbolic weight. Beyond politics, veterans and military officers reacted sharply as well. Many British and American veterans who fought in Afghanistan said NATO forces were not only present on the front lines, but were involved in some of the fiercest fighting from the very early years of the war, when U.S. troop levels had not yet surged in certain areas. They described a battlefield reality where national lines blurred, where soldiers fought, were wounded, and died side by side, with no notion of standing behind as Trump suggested. Trump's 5 deferments from military service became a central factor in how Europe viewed his comments. They raised questions about the credibility and standing of someone willing to belittle others' sacrifices while never having accepted comparable risks himself, in a military alliance, where a leader's personal credibility directly affects strategic trust. This contradiction is profoundly corrosive. Throughout the Cold War, NATO endured not only because of US military power, but because of confidence in Washington's commitment. European countries accepted security dependence on the US because they believed that, in return, the US would treat their security as a vital national interest of its own. When a US president openly questions the extent of Allied sacrifice, that psychological foundation begins to crack. In the United Kingdom, the controversy quickly shifted from outrage to anxiety. The special relationship between the US and the UK, long regarded as a cornerstone of London's foreign policy, suddenly appeared more fragile than ever. When British soldiers who died in Afghanistan are described as being in the rear, the question arises, in a future crisis, can the UK trust that the US will view British sacrifices as equal and worthwhile? In Denmark, the reaction was even deeper. As a small country, Denmark accepted high casualty rates in Afghanistan precisely because it believed alliance with the US was the right strategic choice. When that belief is damaged, the result is not only anger, but long-term doubt about security orientation. Many analysts warn that countries like Denmark may begin seeking bilateral or regional security arrangements to reduce the risks of overdependence on Washington. At the NATO level, Trump's remarks create a dangerous paradox. On one hand, the US remains the alliance's most powerful military force, one no country can replace. On the other hand, unpredictability in political messaging from Washington undermines NATO's deterrent value, but deterrence rests not only on strength, but on confidence that strength will be used when necessary. If NATO's adversaries, from Russia to non-state actors, begin to doubt that the US would hesitate to defend its allies, the alliance's deterrence will weaken even if its military capabilities on paper remain unchanged. This is what worries many European security officials most. It is not that Trump insults the past, but that he weakens the future. From the US side, the controversy also exposes an internal contradiction in Trump's foreign policy. On one hand, he claims to want to reduce overseas military involvement and avoid endless wars. On the other, he damages the alliances that allow the US to share security burdens. When allies feel disrespected, they become less willing to share risks in the future, forcing the US into harder, not easier choices. Many former US ambassadors to Europe warn that the greatest damage is not a short-term diplomatic crisis, but the erosion of the US brand. For decades, the US was seen as the leader of the international order, imperfect, but reliable. When remarks like Trump's become normalized, that image is replaced by a US that is erratic, personalizes policy, and is willing to deny its own past if it serves immediate political interests. For Europe, this creates a difficult choice. It cannot, and does not want to, fully separate from the US, but it can no longer act as if US commitments are automatic. The result is a slow but steady strategic adjustment, in which Europe seeks to strengthen its own defense capabilities, deepen internal cooperation, and broaden ties with other partners, from Canada to Asia. In that broader picture, Trump's comments about Afghanistan are not the sole cause, but they are a powerful catalyst. They concentrate anxieties and doubts about the US role into a single, easily identifiable moment, and for that reason, they carry far greater impact than earlier disputes over budgets or tariffs.